Joseph Stiglitz is our guest. New book out, The $3 Trillion War. We had him on with us last January. We also interviewed him here in Austin for the TV show. And he said that within 2.5 years, if the global financial order did not make some serious reforms, we would have the hyperinflation that could lead to a worldwide depression. And you can go to the website, Infowars.com, if you want to read that article from last year. He is a Nobel Prize winner in economics. He is a former World Bank chief economist. If I tried to go over his entire bio, it would take hours, but you can just Google Joseph Stiglitz. He's written quite a few best-selling books as well. The new one, The $3 Trillion War, and that's just how much it costs now, not to mention our good name worldwide. And so I really appreciate Joseph Stiglitz joining us. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Nice to be here.
You were here about 1 year and 4 months ago, and you laid out in 20 minutes a forecast of what indeed happened, but we've gone about 90% into your forecast. I'm hoping the rest of the 10% isn't correct and we don't have a depression in another 2 years. What do you see happening?
Well, actually, the prospects of our economy right now are not very good. To some extent, what happens depends on what the American government and other governments do. But right now, even the IMF, and I've often disagreed with the IMF, but right now I think they're on target. They are saying that the American economy is going to be very weak, not only this year, but next year, and it won't be until 2010 before the economy really starts to show a recovery. Part of the problem is that the current administration has been doing too little, too late. What they've been doing is not well designed. And the fundamentals of economic policy are that it takes a while before any action that you take has full effect. So if this administration isn't going to do anything, it's going to be until the next administration comes into office, and that means it will we won't begin to get the right medicine until the beginning of 2009, and that means we're talking about late 2009, 2010, before we start seeing really a solid recovery.
Now, a lot of people throwing around the term depression. A lot of top economists have. You've used that term before. A depression, I guess, would be...
I would be a little bit cautious about using that term. I think that we tend to reserve that for the Great Depression, or for the kind of situation that was in the island of Java in 1997, 98.
A breakdown, a collapse, starving. But I mean, a recession, you're the Nobel Prize winning economist, but tell me if I'm wrong. A recession is 2 continual quarters of zero growth. And then a depression would be how many quarters?
Well, they don't actually. We usually think of a depression as really very strong negative growth for an extended period of time. But it doesn't make any difference. The fundamental question is whether the U.S. economy is going to be performing below its potential for an extended period of time. And, on that, I think there is almost unanimity now among economists that we're looking towards an extended period of the economy operating below its potential. And there's a very simple reason, and part of the reason why there's a little bit of discussion of depression is that the fundamental reason for this downturn is very similar to that of the Great Depression: weaknesses in the financial system. The losses that the banks are incurring, the financial system incurring, are quite literally mind-boggling. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. We've seen lots of write-offs. And the IMF estimates the total amount to be nearly $1 trillion.
And then there's that cascading effect as you have the bubble popping, everybody leveraged out in the Western world, more and more housing crises with subprimes, more and more of all these instruments, they're AAA rated. I mean, it's all leading towards, you said here a year ago that, you talked about the term depression. Now I guess things are so serious you don't want to use that term. What I'm trying to understand here is how we could get out of this, where you see this, where do you see it going with the current management and the different jockeying groups that are out there at the helm of central banks versus where you'd like to see it go?
Yeah, well, the basic thing is that what happens to the financial sector is not unconnected. It's very closely connected with the real sector. Wall Street and Main Street are very closely linked. If, as is what's happening, the financial sector is having serious economic problems, it has no choice but to start reining in credit. If it's not making loans, individuals, households, firms can't do the investment that they would otherwise have done. As they cut back their economic activity, the whole economy slows down, and the whole thing just sort of unravels. And that's what we're beginning to see go our economy going through. Now, you are absolutely right, and I've been talking about this actually now for several years. It was so clear that we faced a housing bubble, and that housing bubble was sustaining a consumption boom. Savings in the United States plummeted to zero, some quarters negative. It was clear that that was not sustainable. What was going on? Well, it's pretty simple, and it's actually related to my book, The $3 Trillion War, where I argue that, in fact, there's not two issues in this campaign, but one, the war and the economy are very closely connected. The war was having a very negative effect on the economy for a variety of reasons that I spell out. The Fed said we have to cover it up. Our job is to keep the economy going, and they did it in a very short-sighted way. They let loose a flood of liquidity and loose regulations, and what happened was it did cover up the negative effects of the war. But we were living on borrowed money and borrowed time, and a day of reckoning had to come. We couldn't predict when it was going to come, but we knew that it was going to come.
So in layman's terms, how bad is it going to get? Because I've had the head of the New York business school on. I've had all these other former Treasury policy heads. I've had them, I've had the shadow stats people on about what real inflation is at like 15% now. Look at the food, look at the oil, look at the dollar plunging. And then Bush is out giving speeches saying we're not even in a recession. He said that 2 days ago at the SPP meeting, on the North American integration. I mean, it's just... And the old cliche of it's a recession if your neighbor's out of work, it's a depression if you're out of work. I mean, if half the Social Security check value has been cut in the last 5 years, compounded, and believe me, I know I got families on Social Security. If people are out of work, if I'm seeing more homeless people, if there's houses going, all over the place going under, hell, this is just the beginning, Mr. Stiglitz. How bad is it going to get?
Worse. I mean, we expect now, at least in the next year, about 2.2 million Americans will lose their homes, and with that, much of their life savings. Many of these will lose their entire life savings. The forecast is that housing prices, already gone down 10%, are probably going to go down another 10 to 20%. When that happens, we're not sure how many houses will be underwater, but numbers 14, 15 million households will have mortgages exceeding the value of their house. We're in for very unlikely a very bad time. Now, the president is trying to push the problems of the economy onto the next administration, just like he pushed the problem of the war onto the next administration. I think he'd hoped that the whole bubble wouldn't break until after November 2008, but it began to unravel in August 2007. Like so many other things in the last few years, they haven't gone quite according to plan. The big uncertainty, as I say, is what will be done. Let me tell you some of the things that need to be done. We need a stimulus. The president seems to think that a tax cut is the solution to all problems, particularly tax cuts for the rich. In fact, I would argue that our current problems actually began with the 2001 tax cut. It actually set us on a wrong course.
What about the argument that cutting taxes generally raises the general amount of tax receipts because it accelerates the economy?
That's this old idea of supply-side economics. It was totally discredited in the 80s, and you see it right now. The way that I was supposed
to work I thought increased spending. I mean, more money did come in.
Well, let me try to go through the two sides of it. On the supply side, that's the traditional argument, is that it's supposed to encourage labor supply and savings. Well, it hasn't exactly done that. Savings has gone down to zero. I don't see how you can say that the tax cuts help savings.
No, it's done the opposite, yeah.
And labor force participation, which is the labor side, is weaker than it was in the 90s, so it hasn't worked. Now, on the demand side, it did help a little bit, but much, much less than would have been the case had we given a tax cut to lower and middle-income Americans. We gave tax cuts to the very rich Americans who were...
I agree. We need to slash taxes on the middle class. The problem is the blue-collar folks think the middle class are the elite, Dr. Stiglitz. I mean, that's the larger issue. And I want to get into your book in the time we've got, in the 15 minutes we've got left before we end this at 58 after with you, sir. But because it's a very powerful book. I saw the Financial Times of London about 8 months ago say that the headline that bigger institutional banks could stand to gain from all this, and that they all played the game of issuing liquidity. They bought real assets. They grabbed infrastructure. They grabbed different commodities, and then now governments are coming in bailing that out. They're gobbling up more banks. The Federal Reserve's talking about taking over 3 federal regulatory agencies, the private Fed. More foxes watching the hen house. And so I also see a predatory capitalism, and I'm for capitalism, but not the predatory crony type, here, where it's not just a bunch of people screwing up. It's a bunch of reckless people that knew they could create a money bubble that they could use to literally buy the planet up with, and then we, the people, get left holding the bag with hyperinflation and with taxes to pay it back.
Well, you've identified one of the big problems. What we've been doing is we've been socializing risk and privatizing wealth. And the banks walked off. A lot of the investors, investment banks walked off. Their senior officials with these huge bonuses, some exceeding $1 billion. Meanwhile, the taxpayers are being left to pick up the risk. The Federal Reserve exposed the taxpayers to a $29 billion risk. And we don't even know. It was done in so non-transparent way. We don't know fully how much we are totally at risk for. Meanwhile, Bear Stearns shareholders walked off with over $1 billion of money totally without paying a cent of insurance premium for the risk that taxpayers have picked up. I mean,
notice Bear Stearns got their bonuses right before all this happened. That was very suspicious. Was that used as a cover for J.P. Morgan Chase being in trouble, that they grabbed Bear Stearns? Because there's talk that they were in trouble as well, and there are a lot of other brokerage houses that were in worse trouble than Bear Stearns. But I mean, that was very strange what happened there.
Oh, I agree. It was very strange. All I can say is that there's a lot of lack of transparency in the financial markets, and to be honest, we don't really know what is going on.
Well, as you know, sir, in the last month, 3 big central bankers in Europe have said that in mid-March we narrowly avoided total financial collapse. Now, I know you're a very important person, Nobel Prize winner, former Chief Economist, World Bank. You don't want to freak people out or anything, but I mean, on the good side, 2 or 3 years of recession, tell me if I'm wrong, and then we come out of it with some new bubble, and then we just kind of have some inflation. On the bad side, just war in the streets, starving people, running around with machine guns. I mean, the government's building FEMA camps. That's in the news. Bush has said he's gotten ready for martial law. I mean, I'm sure you're an educated guy. You've seen that in the news. The government's acting really weird right now. What are the chances of the good side, bad recession, bad side depression, really bad side? Because we had a 1929 depression. Now, most people can't even have their own food, don't live on farms.
Well, right now, the world is in a rather unusual situation that at the same time we're facing one of the most troubling periods in terms of economic downturns with this almost $1 trillion losses on the financial system, we are also facing high levels of inflation that you referred to earlier. Price of oil is over $100 a barrel. Price of food is skyrocketing. While things are bad in the United States, we have to remember how much worse they are in most of the developing countries.
Food rise.
They have to spend most of their money to get by on food and energy, and with food and energy prices soaring, they're having real trouble. And it's not a surprise that riots have been breaking out in many developing countries, and I anticipate to see more of that. And that just highlights the difficulty that the global economy is facing.
Meanwhile, a few billion dollars could have fed these people, but instead, like your new book says, $3 trillion has been spent. So who are the real culprits? I mean, who are the bad guys in all of this? Who are the main companies, the main individuals? We know it's bigger than George Bush, Mr. Stiglitz.
Well, I mean, the point that you just made is I just want to emphasize $3 trillion is a lot of money. And if we expend that on helping people in the developing countries, helping America. I was just in Gary, Indiana, the city I was born in, and talking to the mayor, and he said, $3 trillion, we can't get 3 cents out of the federal government. Our city is decaying. Schools need help. Our road infrastructure filled with potholes, and we just can't get the money that we need to help revive our economy.
And it's no bid contracts to Dubai. Halliburton isn't even here now.
That is another part of the scandal. You asked who were the winners. There are actually only 2 winners in this war. The oil companies have made out fantastically with the soaring oil prices, but the real winners are the defense contractors, and number one on that, Halliburton. Their stock prices have is almost tripled. In previous wars, there has been a sense of shared sacrifice. We send our young men and women off to fight. The rest of us make a contribution by paying taxes. There's an effort to make sure that there's no profiteering. Well, this is the first war in America's history that we put entirely on the credit card.
And that's what Lee Iacocca said. Stay there. Joseph Stiglitz, the new book, ladies and gentlemen, bookstores everywhere will tell you about it, the $3 trillion war, on the other side of this quick break with our guest. We'll have 5 minutes with him on the other side. Really appreciate him spending time with us today.
Of course, if that happens, we know that's a disaster.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What do we do? I mean, if they continue the war, continue all the spending, and it doesn't stop, doesn't that assure a depression? I mean, if they don't make the reforms now, and it seems like they're not going to make any of the reforms.
Well, I think the good news is that we have democracy, and I think there's enough anger about what is going on. The fact is that money that they've defended what they've done on the basis of a need for security, but actually our security is less as a result of this war.
Well, exactly. There weren't many real terrorists before, but now the Army admits that it's been a factory creating them in Iraq.
That's right. Al-Qaeda was not there in 2003. Now Al-Qaeda is there.
Well, what about the asinine statement that, and we'll talk about this in air when we get back, the asinine statement that Iran is Al-Qaeda, and then McCain just said to Petraeus last week in the testimony, isn't Iran Al-Qaeda? And Petraeus said, yes, they are.
No, I mean, it's totally different. In fact, their perspectives on even Islam are totally different.
Okay, well, let's just come back, talk about the book, ending the war, what some of the steps are to reverse this, and then what will happen if we don't do something about the spending and all the insanity. And we only have 5 minutes when we get back. Can you tell folks how low you think the dollar will go? I mean, just tell me. How low do you think the dollar is going to go, sir?
It's very hard to predict that, and the reason why it's very hard to predict that is that it depends more than almost anything else on what governments do. One of the problems is a lot of discussion about whether the European Central Bank is going to increase interest rates, lower interest rates. The new high in the dollar that just happened this week was a result in part because the rumors that the European Central Bank was going to raise their interest rate.
Stay there, sir. We're going live right now. Here we go. Joseph Stiglitz, former chief economist, World Bank, Nobel Prize winner. He left in 2002, exposed a lot of the internal corruption, the IMF riot, how they go in and want economies to crater so they can buy it up, the 100-point plan, all of that. I got to get him back up, and I hate even talking over him. I just have so many questions. Your new book, The $3 Trillion War, breaking this down. If we don't end the war and it costs another $3 trillion in 5 years, will that ensure a deeper financial crisis, or is this good for us?
Oh, it's definitely not good for us. You know, there's an idea that goes back, a myth goes back to World War II, that wars are good for the economy.
Guns and butter.
But we know, at least since the time of Keynes, that you can stimulate the economy without going to war. And these other ways, investments in education, health, roads, infrastructure, have long-term productivity. Nobody ever said that wars have good long-term productivity effects, increase our living standards. This particular war has been very bad for our economy. And the easy way to see that is spending money on a Nepalese contractor working in Iraq just doesn't provide much stimulus to the economy anywhere near as much as spending the same amount of money building a road in the U.S. So, and this war has also been bad because it set forth the rise in oil prices.
Don't you also have the fraud associated? You know, $15 million Halliburton blue tarps.
Yeah, I mean that's the example of you know, that kind of spending doesn't help the American economy, and make it even worse. Halliburton operates offshore. So it does that so it doesn't have to avoid taxes, that it doesn't pay Medicare and Social Security taxes. You know, normally we would be coming down hard on anybody.
But it's Dick Cheney. Why are we seeing this level of arrogance? Even Lee Iacocca has come out and said we, quote, have a criminal corporate elite running the White House, running the government, destroying the nation. Did you see those quotes?
No, I didn't. But he's, you know, it is astounding. And the problem is, it's not only bad directly for our economy, it undermines confidence in our country. You know, anybody who wants to deal with the United States says, you know, what's going on here?
Exactly. So we've only got 2 minutes left, and I want to talk about the book, but then it doesn't look like the war is going to end. They're building all these permanent bases, calling them embassies. The name's been destroyed. They say we're going to be there forever. The other political candidates say, well, we'll keep some troops there. It looks to me like what you said a year ago is happening. They're not going to change course.
I think they won't change course unless the American voters come out and give a very strong message. You know, we're spending $12 billion up front every month that we're in Iraq. But actually, the total cost, which includes the disabilities, about 40% of the people coming back from Iraq are disabled, some with absolutely horrible disabilities. When you start including all the other costs, it's about twice that. Anybody who says stay the course has to say how we're going to be able to afford $25 billion a month. But even that doesn't take into account the full cost, because at the beginning of the war we were spending $4 billion a month. Now we're up to $12 billion. The longer we stay, the monthly charge goes up. So we're going to be, staying there every month is going to cost more and more and more.
Sir, we're out of time. Just absolutely incredible. Stay right there. I'd like to speak to you for one moment when the show ends here on the network. Retransmission starts right now at Infowars.com. I've got to get you back up on the show because I want to find out what your take is. I respect it. If it's not going to end, then what will become of us? Okay. Going back to you, Mr. Stiglitz, just here at the end, I mean, your real take on all this, it doesn't look like to me that they're going to change course or stop, and that this is really just a giant looting enterprise that's going on, and that everything's gone completely criminal.
Well, I think, I mean, what you're saying is we're a rich country. We can afford it in the sense that we aren't going to go bankrupt overnight, but it's very corrosive, and our living standards will be going down. And what's particularly hard is the impact on the average American. The median American, the person in the middle, income today is lower than it was in 1999. And the fact that more and more we spend on the waste on this war, the lower and lower their income is going to be. And we don't have the money to invest it.
Well, I mean, you didn't feel good a year ago about what they were doing to stop this. Do you feel good now? Do you think they're going to fix it?
No. I feel more and more depressed. But I do. I mean, quite frankly, I am optimistic that if Obama gets elected, he knows that he has to change things. And so I actually,
but you're not confident about Hillary and McCain.
Well, I know about McCain. He's made it very clear.
Bomb Iran.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that one can anticipate that if he gets involved, things could get much worse.
Well, Mr. Stiglitz, I don't want to abuse your time. I want to thank you for the time you've spent with us, and maybe I can have you back up a little bit sooner than a year so we can really flesh.
Love to do that.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for writing the book.
Okay, great.
Take care.
Yeah, bye.
You bet. John, good job to you guys at the network. I want to let you get disconnected so other stuff can come up, and I want to thank the folks here running things. I'll see you this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m., and back live next Monday, folks. And we're bringing you the best guests, the best info, all of it right here. Please become a PrisonPlanet.tv member if you're out there listening and want to see the video of the fourth hour and into overdrive and some behind-the-scenes things you won't get anywhere else because that capital helps us operate. We're in very, very serious times. You just heard him say worse than what he thought last year. He talked about depression last year. And the fourth hour is over now. I had Luke Radowski and others on with the incredible news of them being framed in the first hour. That retransmission starts right now at Infowars.com. So go there and check it out. God bless you all. Take care, John.